Welcome back, friends. I'm reading through my book, Letters from Backstage, that is a chronicle of my time on the road with two different Broadway tours. It's been really nostalgic for me and kind of nice to at least mentally get out of the house during this time when none of us are going anywhere. Um, and so we get to our next chapter, chapter 15, A Flicker of Flint. October 21st, 2003. Greetings, friends. I hope you're well. Out here on the road, the days and the cities are whizzing by. Since this particular tour consists of mostly one-week engagements, we're packing up and moving nearly every Monday, our day off. Naturally, that can be grueling, but on the upside, you never get tired of any city. Soon enough, the scenery changes. As for me, I'm finding that the joy of being in this great show, and in fact, the joy of making a living as a professional actor, more than sustains me, at least for now. If there's one thing I've learned about touring, it's that one's attitude can change as swiftly as the scenery. If you've been followers of Letters from Backstage for a while, you've probably noticed that pattern. You may also have observed that on the road, as in life in general, experiences are often a matter of perspective, where you're at mentally more than where you're at physically. I've learned that over and over. My recent return to Cleveland was a great illustration. Same place, two visits, two very different experiences. And while I'm a staunch disbeliever when it comes to the idea of creating things through positive thinking, I nevertheless adhere to a strict policy of being ever mindful of the strong possibility that I am 100% full of shit on any particular subject. I do know this. If you're able to look at the bright side, if indeed there even is a bright side to your circumstances, well, then it certainly doesn't hurt. It beats the hell out of whining. And so I'm afraid that I've become a reluctant glass half fuller. Flint, Michigan was immortalized in Michael Moore's brilliant documentary, Roger and Me. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Among other things, it presents a city that was once economically healthy, supported mostly by the Ford auto plant where most of the citizens worked. But when Ford closed up shop, abandoning its loyal workers, many were plunged into poverty. The movie's pretty bleak. But I never saw that Flint, the one with the closed factories and going out of business signs. Only the small corner of it where the Holiday Inn Express sits near a curved highway interchange in the middle of nowhere. I checked into my modest room. Nothing lavish, but perfectly fine for a one-week stay. The late afternoon autumn sun shone through the single window, which looked out on the hotel driveway's overhang. Beyond the parking area, past a few feet of grass, cars whizzed by intermittently. Beyond that, on the other side of the street, in the middle of a large parking lot, I noticed a long, low building with stalls outside. A farmer's market. These, I thought, are the things that make each place unique. I left my suitcases packed and headed back out to explore. Crossing that highway interchange was a perilous adventure in itself. There was no crosswalk or light, you just had to make an educated guess and go for it. But once on the other side, the farmer's market proved nearly worth the risk of being run over. It was warm inside, and there was an eclectic collection of wares from local merchants. In addition to the usual fresh produce, there were used books and CDs, silk flowers, homemade jam, soap, incense, and even an art gallery. But first things first, I was hungry. At the far end, I found a vendor whose menu included a fantastic homemade chili. There was a little cafe upstairs, but it was closed. In fact, opportunities to dine there were elusive. It was only open until 3 p.m. and only on the 3 days a week when the farmer's market was open, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. The word was that the food there was great and homemade, and that there was usually a line to get in. Well, of course there would be, since there wasn't much else in the area. I learned all of this and other interesting facts from the woman who sold me the delicious chili. The market used to be open 7 days a week, she told me, but like a lot of things in Flint, it fell upon hard times and nearly shut its doors permanently. It was rescued when the city leased the market to the Uptown Reinvestment Corporation, which now runs it. Happily, Business is on the upswing, but only enough to sustain 3 days a week. I asked if she'd ever seen Roger and Me. I had to remind her what it was. Oh no, I heard about that movie. Most of us aren't too interested in seeing that. And I got the same answer from everyone I asked. We all spent a fair amount of time at the farmer's market that week. When the cafe was open, we lined up with the locals to get in. It was like waiting at an exclusive New York dance club, hoping the bouncer would admit you, or like visiting Seinfeld's Soup Nazi. The day I went to lunch there with Tanya, the man behind us in line meekly asked if he could join us rather than take a whole table to himself. He wanted to free up the next one for a larger party. Well, it seemed only right. And we lunched with a genuine Flintian who ended up coming to see the show. The market itself was a great boon, especially for those in the company who are into health food. They stocked up on nuts, vegetables, fruits, both fresh and dried, homemade vegetable soup, local honey, and so on. It seemed there were about 162 varieties of apples alone, all fresh from the tree. Even the less healthy among us came along just for the browse. We all learned the market's hours very quickly, and the place was always hopping when it was open. On the other side of the hotel, just across the parking lot, was the other establishment that experienced a sudden surge in business that week, the China Sea. It was no more than a slightly below mediocre Chinese buffet with a bar, which was roughly the size of a Volkswagen Bug in the middle of the room, but with no restaurant in the hotel. And the farmer's market closed more often than not. Believe me, the China Sea was the place to be. Now, when I say there was nothing else around, I mean that we were practically on an island, a concrete island, amidst a sprawling sea of crisscrossing streets and overpasses. There may have been other places in the vicinity, but I never found them. And it was perfectly all right. If Les Miserables had been playing on a desert island that week instead of a concrete one, we'd have all learned to make fire, catch live fish with our bare hands, and build thatched huts from palm fronds. Instead, we relished our steam table cuisine, embracing it as part of the adventure of touring. We even convinced them to stay open late for post-show drinks. The owner was thrilled. The kitchen was normally closed at that hour, but when he saw the potential for more sales, he started cranking out egg rolls by the panful, and that became our post-show meal. Egg rolls and martinis. One night I even brought my Scrabble board. I don't think the staff quite knew what to make of us, but they were glad for the business. The granola crowd, of course, avoided the China Sea like the plague. People have various ways of living on the road, and the health conscious have to be especially creative. Cindy, for example, who plays my wife, travels with her own hot plate, pots, and pans, so she's never stuck eating at the local greasy spoon. Me, I take potluck and enjoy the experience when in Rome and all that. Now, you may wonder, why Flint? How did this particular town get on the schedule? I can't say I have the answer to that, but to me, there is something poetic about Les Miserables, a story in which the poor rise up against an unfeeling establishment, playing a town like Flint, where people have been sold out by big corporations. True, it may be that only the unfeeling establishment can afford tickets, but I like the idea of them seeing the show as well. Les Miserables champions the underdog and makes us all care about the poor. Not to be grandiose, but it might be a story that they need to hear. On opening night, I put on my coat, grabbed the map provided by our company managers, and headed for the theater. I walked along the wide street that ran past the China Sea's service entrance. I crossed over a freeway, down a long block, and across the street onto a campus parking lot. There was no roadside marquee. One of our trucks parked near the street was the only sign that our show was playing there. It took some hunting, but I found the stage door down a steep ramp at the far end of the lot. The backstage space was so limited that our company managers were set up in a trailer office outside. Yes, things were tight. At our usual first day in a new city notes session, our stage manager urged us to stay to the right and keep moving while in the hallways, as they were just barely wide enough for two people. If you stopped to have a conversation, you were in someone's way. There wasn't any place for the kids' schoolroom, so during the show, we'd see them huddled with Lois around a small folding table by the loading dock, trying to play a board game without making any noise. In the doorway at the end of one hallway, our crew had installed a step unit that led directly to the stage floor. 3 more feet, and you'd be in 19th century France. I wish all of you could watch a big musical like ours from Backstage someday. It's a remarkable thing, but we wouldn't have had room for you in Flint. We barely had room for the ball gowns. Flint, as you may have figured out on your own, isn't what you'd call an A city in the language of those who book touring shows. It's never going to be the first city a show plays. In fact, it's not going to be the 2nd, nor the 5th, nor the 12th, nor even the 20th. It's the kind of place you might hit once your show has played all the major and medium-sized cities, as Les Mis has. In Boston, Cleveland, San Francisco, Cincinnati, and other major cities, there are people who make their living doing theater full-time. Not so in a city like Flint. And as such, your local crew members may not get a whole lot of practice doing whatever it is they're doing. One of my castmates was greeted by his dresser, a little old lady with a very scattered energy, like so. "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I've never done this before. I'm so nervous." And she was. She handled her nervousness with jokes. Jokes in lieu of the much-needed garments my poor castmate was awaiting during his fast costume changes. But after a few nights, her nervousness gave way to a sort of quiet, frozen terror, which is where she plateaued for the remainder of the run. My dresser was an unusually eager young woman. Whenever I'd approach the dressing area, she'd leap from her chair and assume a wide stance with her knees slightly bent, her hands spread in front of her, and rock back and forth, prepared to catch, one might assume, a flaming cannonball if necessary. I believe this woman would be ready, willing, and able to administer CPR or deliver a baby at a moment's notice. There was a generalized busyness about her, and her hypervigilance made it difficult for her to let me go once I was dressed. She'd follow, yanking on my collar, straightening my rags, pulling on the hem of my smock, right up until I was on stage. My instinctive reaction was to project a dead calm in hopes that it would be contagious. So for each costume change, I'd slowly, gingerly approach the dressing area, patting the air in a calming gesture, and say in the reassuring tone of a hostage negotiator, "Please, don't get up. I'm fine. Everything's cool. We've got all the time in the world." It takes a certain personality to be a good dresser. She didn't have it. In her defense, it wasn't her usual gig. But all of this merely served as amusement. Nothing upset me in the least. Like I said, perspective. And that week, I was blessed with a good one. I enjoyed the oddity and bittersweet charm of the off-the-beaten-track tour stop. In fact, to me, it was a little bit beautiful. And how often would I be in Flint? And it was only a week, which added a lot to its appeal. 1 week more of the China Sea's greasy egg rolls and my one-woman SWAT team, and I might have been screaming a very different tune. But while we're here are a few snapshots. One night after the show, as we crossed the campus on the way back to the hotel, a few of us paused by a playground area. A row of swings hung there empty in the darkness. We all decided to swing a bit before heading home. I can't tell you the last time I was on a swing. We started slowly, but before you knew it, there was that nostalgic squeak and clanking of chains as some of my younger associates started going for it full throttle. Other colleagues passing by smiled and shook their heads. Some decided to join us, and we laughed like little kids with giddy abandon, swinging as high as we dared toward the night sky. I hung out one afternoon with Ma Anne, who plays Eponine. I like her. She's an extremely passionate, talented performer and uniquely individual. I get the sense that her journey, like mine, hasn't always been easy, and that makes me like her even more. We had lunch, then we walked along the path behind the farmer's market. There were beautiful fall leaves on the ground, and they crunched as we walked. We stopped to watch a family of ducks paddling along in the stream. We talked about life, touring, and her fantastic 5-year-old son. Before leaving on tour, I'd packed a box of winter clothes and left them in my apartment to be shipped later. My friend who's subletting my place in Los Angeles sent them to me here in Flint. Oh, the joys of having a wonderful subletter. And it was like opening a big Christmas present, since I'd forgotten what I'd packed in that box. The timing was perfect as it was starting to get mighty chilly. And soon enough, it was time to hit the road again. And that was my Flint. Some fallen leaves, some freshly picked apples, some interesting locals, a weird Chinese place, some oddball dressers, some major swinging, and 8 performances for 8 appreciative audiences in a town that doesn't get many shows like Les Miserables. When my head's in the right place, these are the things that make road life such a remarkable gift. It's also a gift when I hear from you all, so drop me a line when you can. Hope you're all spectacular. Kostrov. That last line was because these were originally emails, as you may remember from my introduction. But yeah, drop me a line. I really like hearing from you. It's so nice to know that you all are enjoying these chapters. And I will remind you that I still have many copies of my book that I'm giving away as gifts. So if you'd like one, you can write to me at this email address right here and give me your mailing address. Don't forget to do that. And I'll be delighted to send you a book. All right, friends. See you for the next one.